The 540 is brought to you by StarCityGames.com's weekly sale. Head over to StarCityGames.com/sale and check out the High Dollar Sale. From now until Sunday, February 20th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, you can save 10% on all cards priced over $99.99. That's right, if it's normally $100 or more, it's 10% off this week. If you've got a high dollar card you've been eyeing but have been waiting for the right time to buy, that time is now, and the place is StarCityGames.com/sale.
The 540 is brought to you by Coalesce Apparel and Design. Go to coalesceapparel.shop for the coolest MTG apparel out there. From shirts to hoodies to stickers, they got you. Save 10% at checkout with gift code SCG. Hate mulliganing? Me too. Join me as part of the Anti-Mulligan Mulligan Club. Think math is for blockers? Rep the alphas at Attack University. And don't forget to save 10% at checkout with gift code SCG. Coalesce Apparel and Design. No one made what they wanted, so they made it themselves.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our cube review for Kamigawa Neon Dynasty here on the 540. This week, we are doing the red and black cards as a follow-up to last week's start with the white and blue cards from the set. I am Ryan Overturf. You can find me at Ryan Overdrive on Twitter, and this week I am once again joined by Ryan Saxe. Say hello to the people, Ryan.
Hi, people. I'm Ryan Saxe, and you can find me at RC Saxe on Twitter.
Yeah, so last week we did white and blue, and at this point the set has been released digitally, and we're coming at the tail end of pre-release weekend here. Did you have any insights from starting to play the set, or any cards maybe that we already talked about that have changed in your evaluation at all?
I'm not sure 100% what we've exactly talked about, but I guess I'll take a minute to talk about the sagas, the flip sagas. So my initial impression, and I think most people's impressions when evaluating these, was that they're pretty slow. Right, you play them, you don't really get the creature for a couple turns. When you get the creature, it's summoning sick, unlike Suspend, right? Which is a similar thing where you pay a low investment for a card, and then later you get the card, but then it has haste. Almost 100% of these sagas are like way, way, way better than we thought we would be. We're talking like most of them are the top commons in the limited format. The thing that I missed about them is really generally you're spending 1 or 2 mana on this, and what you're getting is often a body that is better than the mana that you spent. You just don't get it for a little while. Right. So usually what this means is your turn 4 or whatever it is, you have a much better board presence, and unlike Suspend, you've already gotten some amount of value. So you've spent significantly less mana for the rate that you've gotten, plus then some, right? And so they're all just playing fantastic. They're not really the kinds of cards that are going to make it into the classic kind of cube sections. But if you have a Pauper or even Peasant cube, but particularly Pauper cubes, I think you should take a look at almost all of the sagas.
Nice. Certainly makes sense to me. We talked about some of those sagas last week, and we'll be talking about some more this week. So take that knowledge when you're looking back at last week's episode to change those evaluations. And we know that now when we get to talk about some cards this week. And there's definitely some of these sagas that I've seen in action already that look a lot better now after having seen them played and played with them.
Yeah.
And on the topic of other cards that we maybe did or should have talked about last week, we do have the full commander deck previews now. Every set, of course, having a concurrent commander deck release these days. And I often, when it comes to the commander decks, will just urge people, if you have a cube, pay attention to these if you're interested in adding commander cards. Not everybody is. If you are, you want to be mindful of the themes. We have a pretty big vehicle theme going on with this commander release. There's some stuff going on with legends and some nods to modifications. We have a blue-white commander deck and a red-green commander deck. For the most part, these are kind of commander style cards. So more mileage on average for a commander cube than in a 1v1 cube environment. But there are 2 cards that I believe are worth a look when it comes to just regular cubes. And they're both a little on the custom side, but there's some real power here. The first card I want to talk about is one that I know that you are pretty excited about, and that is Swift Reconfiguration. This is 1 white mana for an aura with flash that enchants a creature or vehicle. An enchanted permanent is a vehicle artifact with crew 5 and loses all other card types. And the reason that I would say that Ryan is probably excited about this is to put it on a devoted druid.
Oh yeah. I mean, one of the things that I've wanted, like it's been on my wish list to have a second playable card to make infinite mana with devoted druid. I never thought I would get it. Like I just assumed that wouldn't be printed. I mean, there are other ones that exist. They're just not like they're not good enough, right? I have Vizier for persist combo, and devoted druid, just like a 2-drop dork that taps for 2 mana, is good enough by itself. But I love like that you can hedge towards different combo pieces. So I've wanted this for a very long time, and I'm super happy to get it. In particular, it has a lot more play to it than I originally thought when I read the card at first. I mean, the fact of the matter is there are a lot of really powerful cards that are weaker because they're creatures, usually because they're combo pieces. Mm-hmm. Stuff like Kiki Jiki. And the fact that this can like protect your combo creature oriented pieces is really, really awesome. And I actually think it makes sense in the classic section, but only because it can also function as a removal spell. I mean, crew 5 really is a steep cost. It's pretty hard to crew 5 and have it be worth it. Like for all intents and purposes, if you hit your opponent's 1-drop or 2-drop, it's dead, right? There's not a reason for them to to tap 5 power to be able to attack with a 2-drop or whatever. Right. And so I see this as a reasonable but not great removal spell with combo related potential, which is everything I've ever wanted from any cube card ever.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that combo potential is the big talking point here. As a removal spell, it is good, not great. So when it comes to classically powerful cubes, this obviously, unless you're comboing, compares unfavorably to Swords to Plowshares. It is still better than many removal spells. Swords is, of course, one of the most pushed removal spells of all time. But there are some give and take with this when it comes to certain targets. This is pretty bad as a removal spell for Llanowar Elves, for much the same reason as you're putting it on your Devoted Druid. It can still tap for mana, so you're not getting rid of the relevant part of the card there. It's also a little bit awkward against something like Hellrider, just creatures with abilities and static abilities. It's not the best, but it's good enough. And it's certainly a card that I expect to show up in a good clip of cubes, and I would be amazed if it was not a home run for your classic cube. And it sounds like it is.
Yeah, it's a home run for my classic cube. I wouldn't fault anyone for not playing it, but I do think that, there's quite a few less upside removal spells that still end up in white sections, like different, depending on the number of O-rings that you want, or Journey to Nowhere, or Oust, or all of these, like there are plenty that still end up there. And I do think in higher powered cubes, because you don't want this kind of interaction in lower powered cubes, like jamming this card as a white removal spell, and also just like putting Devoted Druid in your green section over a different 2 mana ramp spell, I think that's cool.
Yeah, and it's not that big of an ask. Devoted Druid is one of the better 2 mana ramp creatures. I won't say the best, because there's some argument for the hexproof or non-targetable ones, and of course Raphellos takes the crown, but it's in contention for one of the best.
Yeah, so it's not like, and that's the thing that I love about designing cubes and figuring out slots, is like when you can, like, let's say you have only room for 2 mana, you feel like there's only room for 2 mana ramp spells in green, and you think that Devoted Druid is the 4th best 2 mana ramp spell. Like choosing to play the Devoted Druid over the Sylvan Caryatid or whatever you have as number 2, and then including this white removal spell, like those are exactly the kinds of decisions in cube design that I'm all for. But it is almost how my cube became more combo oriented, because I ended up making more decisions exactly like that.
Definitely. Yeah, big impact on the cube environment with a small amount of slots accounting for it.
Exactly.
Very cool. The other card I want to talk about from the Commander release here, this one is a little bit more straightforward. This is Yoshimaru Ever Faithful, 1 white mana for a 1/1 legendary dog. Whenever another legendary permanent enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Yoshimaru Ever Faithful, and it has partner. That'll matter for your Commander cubes, but this is just a fine rate. This is going to show up in a number of cubes. I wouldn't fully say I see this as a classic card, because some classically powerful cubes, they have higher or lower volumes of legendary creatures. You probably want to pay at least a little bit attention to that sort of thing. And what actually really excites me about this card, anytime there's another 1, to a lesser extent 2 mana good legendary creature, I started thinking about Mox Amber. And I don't need to combo. I'm not a Kethis guy. I don't need it to be fancy. I want to cast Yoshimaru, Mox Amber, Isamaru. And then I have a 3/3 because my Mox Amber pumps my Yoshimaru and the Isamaru does too. And you're just off to the races. That rules. That really gets me going.
Oh, that does rule. One day, I would say it'll take, I'd be willing to bet 10 years from now, that'll be like a standard in vintage cube. Like all of the 1 mana white creatures will be legendary. They'll all be great, and you'll play Mox Amber.
On a long enough timeline we get there. Yeah, we already have Kithian. Isamaru doesn't show up enough, but kind of like what you were saying with the Swift reconfiguration is once you say, okay, I want Yoshimaru, and then I'm thinking about Mox Amber, then Isamaru comes right back into the cube.
Exactly.
You make these small changes, and now the white deck has like a bonus Mox.
Exactly. And those are the perfect kind of changes. I didn't even realize, for some reason, I thought it was only legendary creatures on the dog. It's any legend that you cast, right?
Yeah, any legendary permanent, and it enters the battlefield. So this also cues off of legendary lands. I know that's something that you talk about. Not every vintage cuber is up on this one, but putting Gaia's Cradle in your mono white aggro deck.
Oh, I definitely do that.
Another point in favor of that.
That's cool. All right, you're starting to talk me up on this card. It's not in the state, like my cube's not in a state where it can take advantage of this yet. But 10 years, in 10 years, it'll be in my cube.
Pick up a copy, put it in what do they call that? When you bury stuff to dig it up, time capsule. Put it in a time capsule. Discover it in your closet later.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's some other stuff going on in the Commander decks. Definitely some cool designs, and we do see a lot of cheaper cards in these Commander releases. So there's something for a lot of people. Check out the file. Those are the 2 that really got my attention. And that's going to add to kind of last week's discussion on white and blue cards from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. But this week, we're here to talk about red and black. And we're going to take our first break here. We'll be back to talk about the black cards from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty.
Hello there from Dominario's Judgment, a weekly podcast for Star City Games with me, Dom Harvey.
And me, Ari Lax.
Where we bring you the latest, greatest, and downright weirdest things Modern has to offer.
Want to know what to expect for next weekend's events? We've got you covered.
Do you want deep breakdowns of the hot topics and decks in Modern? We've got you covered.
Just want to make sure you don't miss the latest nonsense before your opponents teach you a lesson about it in the queues? Oh yeah, we have definitely got you covered. Find us every week on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Or if you want to head over to StarCityGames.com, we'll be right there alongside all the great content from all your other favorite content producers.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's time to talk about the black cards for Cube from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. As usual, we're following our breakdown of classically powerful cards that are just kind of good on their own. You'll see in Cube, just on their own merits mostly. And then we'll be talking about the custom cards. The cards that are looking for specific synergies that maybe need a little bit of help. Our first classic card for black. It's going to be a card that I think I'm a little bit bigger on than most players, but I am a fan of Biting Palm Ninja. This is 2 and a black for a 3/3 human ninja with ninjutsu, 2 and a black. Biting Palm Ninja enters the battlefield with a menace counter on it. And whenever Biting Palm Ninja deals combat damage to a player, you may remove a menace counter from it. When you do, that player reveals their hand and you choose a non-land card from it, exile that card. Now, you're probably not going to see this card in the Magic Online Vintage Cube because the only black 1-drop currently in the list is Putrid Imp, so pretty difficult to ninjutsu. What I do want to highlight, maybe you have a Vintage Cube that's of a slightly different nature, or you go into Legacy Cube, or certainly the Arena Cube where every color has a pretty aggressive slant, and it's still, these are just kind of good cards cubes. This is a creature that has a good rate, an evasive ability, and a disruptive ability. You put that all together, I really love the fact that the casting cost and the ninjutsu cost are both the same, splashable at 2 at a black, and then if you cast it as a creature, it has menace, pretty good at setting itself up, 3/3 body is also not messing around, and kind of no matter what's going on in a game, either the 3/3 body, with or without the menace, matters in the game, or you probably want to tear your opponent's hand apart. Like either creatures are going on or your opponent's doing something more powerful, and getting a look at their hand's going to be powerful. So, 3 mana, kind of caring about combat, not at home in most vintage cubes, but I think it's at home in most legacy cubes. And then certainly as you go lower than that.
Yeah, I think it's almost interesting, right? Because the less your environment is about combo, the more your environment becomes about combat. Is almost like a natural thing that happens. It's why vintage cubes aren't often about combat, but legacy cubes, they're not about combat, but combat plays a more important role than vintage cube. At the same point, like one of the most impactful parts of hand disruption is it's one of the best ways to defend against combo. Right. And so the better the creature part of this card gets, the worse the ability gets. Not that it's like actually worse, it's a good ability. But it becomes less premium, and then I become less excited of picking up my 1 or my 2-drop unless it has some interesting enter the battlefield ability to get in with this. Especially because I'm also more likely to be behind on board if we care more about combat in general. So I'm a big fan of this card for exactly one step under Legacy Cube. I think generally it's going to be a little too inefficient for Legacy Cube, which is why I put it in the custom category. It's going straight into my combat cube, though.
For sure. Yeah, it gets card advantage and it cares about combat.
Yep. And it's a ninja.
It is a ninja. Yeah, you got that theme going. That makes sense. Yeah, the numbers are a little off for the highest powered cubes.
Yeah.
And some of this, we only have one other classic card to discuss, and the big opportunity, the big weakness that Black has in an aggressive color and high-powered cubes is we're just a little light on 1-drops, and maybe over time we'll get more of that. In this set, we did not, and that's going to hurt Biting Palm Ninja for sure.
Yeah. All right. Our last classic card for the Black section from Kamigawa and Neon Dynasty is Blade of the Oni, which I'm pretty excited about. Blade of the Oni is an artifact creature equipment demon for 1 and a black. It is a 3/1 with menace. It has Reconfigure. To remind you, Reconfigure is kind of like the new living weapon. You can, equip it. The biggest difference between Reconfigure and, equipment is that you can pay that equip cost to reconfigure. So you're equipping to some creature. You can also pay that same cost to unequip, not just move from creature to creature, but make the creature that became an equipment back into a creature. Anyways, so Blade of the Oni has Reconfigure for 2 black, and it also has an ability. Equipped creature has base power and toughness, 5/5, has menace, and is a black demon in addition to its other colors and types. So I like this card a lot just as an aggressive, 2 mana 3/1 menace with massive upside is really awesome. I mean, this card is terrifying with a Gravecrawler. Your Gravecrawler is now a 5/5, and what are they supposed to do about it? Kill the Gravecrawler, it comes back, it's 5/5 again. It also has, artifact can be a downside, can be an upside, depending on where you are with things. I'm a huge fan of, these Reconfigure cards when we can add them because they're just more density for Stoneforge Mystic, which is awesome. And this is going in both my classic cube and my combat cube.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. And you know what blows my mind about this creature is that it enters the battlefield untapped and can block. Like, you just get so much on rate, and I just keep rereading the card. I'm like, I'm missing the downside. Does the demon say you can't win the game and your opponents can't lose the game? Like, where is it hiding? But this card is just good.
Yep.
And the biggest barrier it has is, again, support for mono black aggro or heavily skewed black aggressive decks in a cube. And we'll get more of that over time. Blade of the Oni as a standalone card, definitely there on rate if you can make black aggressive decks work.
Yep.
And that's going to do it for classic cards in black. Let's talk about some custom cards. These are cards that are looking for specific synergies or maybe for cubes with other restrictions. Our first card here is going to be Assassin's Ink. 2 black for an instant. Costs 1 less to cast if you control an artifact and 1 less to cast if you control an enchantment. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. This is like a murder variant. It's an uncommon. In a peasant cube, you do see a good spread of artifacts and enchantments. Not all that difficult to imagine this costing 2. It's not the most exciting card, but it's going to fit the bill, certainly for a lot of peasant cubes. You'll have some mana rocks. We see more good just creatures that happen to be artifacts. This set has some good creatures that happen to be enchantments. Certainly powerful enchantments there. Not the most exciting thing, but another good tool.
Yeah, it's a cool one. I mean, I guess the main thing is there's so many murders, right? Like the card 2 black instant, destroy target creature or planeswalker for a peasant cube. I guess that's kind of where it goes. If you have planeswalkers in your peasant cube, there probably aren't that many ways to blow up a planeswalker. Mm-hmm. So like actually, that's an interesting question. If you have a peasant cube and you have planeswalkers from like War of the Spark in your peasant cube, what card do you think is better? And let's say you don't have like a high density of artifacts and enchantments. So like this is more likely to cost 4 than it is to cost 3. What do you like better, this or murder?
I think it depends on your goals for the cube. Murder is certainly going to be more powerful. A problem that I had balancing my Pauper cube for the longest time is just playing creatures was kind of really like a trap. Like trying to attack and block made you feel pretty foolish a lot of the time.
Well, unless they were like Phyrexian Rager. But
right. If they weren't giving you something on the way down, it was definitely a problem. Or you could try to do like hexproof and things like that. But the kill spells are so much better than creatures. And I think when it comes to balanced Pauper environments, certainly this is an uncommon, of course, but there is really a question of peeling back the highest possible power level. And that's true to an extent in Peasant too. That's really different. I think that the sensibilities for most people designing a Peasant cube are going to be pretty different because you just really open the floodgates on power level where Doomblade stops being a problem in the same way it is, like not even the same ballpark as it is in a Pauper cube. So for most Peasant cubes, you're probably looking at Murder. So this one is going to have to care about that artifact and enchantment ability, I have to imagine. But I do see heavy artifact and enchantment counts in these kind of cubes. And when you can cast it for 2, it is exciting. I will agree that is some work. It takes some effort. So,
and at least from what I've felt from the current limited environment, it's a lot easier to have that artifact and enchantment clause than I thought it was going to be. Which just means if you want to design a cube in which this card costs 2 mana sometimes, like in not an unreasonable amount of the time, you probably can.
I will say that something I kind of have in my back pocket, a cube I'm interested in working on, is a cube that really borrows from this set. It would have kind of, I guess, modify as a broad theme. Mm-hmm. And having a combination of auras, and that's going to include bestow creatures, and equipment mattering, and that's going to include a lot of artifact creatures, certainly artifact creatures from this set. And we have a lot of cheap ones. I mean, the next card we're going to talk about is a cheap enchantment creature. And that probably wouldn't if I designed it, be a rarity restricted cube. And this would start to actually look like one of the more appealing removal spells.
Yep. I can see it. All right, let's move to our next card, which would be Dockside Chef, which is a single black mana for a 1/2 enchantment creature human citizen. With the activated ability for 1 and a black, you can sacrifice an artifact or a creature and draw a card. So I also imagine in the type of peasant cube in which Assassin's Link is a nice include. Dockside Chef would also be a nice include, as it's an enchantment creature, and the sacrifice ability can sacrifice like artifact level trinkets. So if you are pushing for that artifact and enchantment theme, this is probably going to be a nice fit. I mean, overall, and we're both part of sort of this same camp, the cheaper the better. I'm a big fan of 1-drops. This is a 1-drop that provides utility. It's not something that I have any cubes that it would go into, but do you have an idea of like what do you think of when you see this card for cube?
I do think of Peasant Cube. I also think that just a lot of cubes with a sacrifice theme are going to be interested in a card like this, just because you do need a lot of cheap bodies. Ideally, you want them to be recursive, but just something that costs 1 fits the bill a lot. And certainly if you're going to a larger cube size, this isn't going to be as good as Blood is the first part of the card's name. 1 mana 2/1 has raid, can't block. You can pay 2 to return it from your graveyard to the battlefield if you attack that turn. That's gonna bug me. But it's from Kanzatarkir.
Bloodsoaked Champion.
Yeah, Bloodsoaked Champion is like clearly like the premium option.
Yep.
But you'll play this card in the like having Bloodsoaked Champion isn't going to stop you from playing this card.
Sure.
You have to have like a high enough volume to not even consider this. And extra sacrifice outlets are always nice in that kind of deck. And I will say for the balance of a lot of cubes, I mean, like Goblin Bombardment is too good for a lot of cubes. Just that free sacrifice outlet is incredibly powerful. So if you wanted to do sacrifice things and not just completely demolish your opponent every time you set up your engine, this is a nice, fun, like incremental value type tool.
Yep. Totally agree.
All right, so our next card is Dokuchi Shadow Walker. 4 black for a 5/5 Ogre Ninja with Ninjutsu, 3 and a black. No other abilities. I love this design. There's a card from Modern Horizons that's like a ninja. I think it also is for 2 Ninjutsu. And it's like a 6/3
of the new moon.
Yeah, it just punches you really hard.
Lava axe on a stick.
I love that. Like, it doesn't technically have an ability, but yeah, exactly what you said. It casts Lava Axe. 4 mana 5/5, that's a good price. You recur something with an enter the battlefield ability. That rules. Awesome card. Primarily, I imagine Pauper Cube is where this would find a home.
Yeah, I think this card's cool. I think it's actually almost in the same vein what you were saying about bringing removal a little bit down. If there are like a good number of 1 and 2 mana interactive spells that are just going to kill this, it's like it can be pretty devastating to spend 4 mana to ninjutsu. But it hits like a truck. I've already had a game of limited where I was on the draw. My opponent played this card and I just conceded. I was just dead. I looked at my hand and I go, well, they have a 5/5. I'm going to be chumping. And I'm like a red-green deck, and I don't have removal spells that are going to kill this. And I was just dead because they were also like they brought back like the 1 mana 1/1 flyer that taps a creature, and so I wasn't even ever going to be able to try and double block it if I could. I mean, is it a broken card in limited? No, it's not. It's actually in this format. It hasn't been as impressive as I thought it would be. But it's certainly something cool for exactly Pauper Cubes, but probably only the ones that actually go for a ninja theme, right?
Yeah, I do imagine probably tamping down the power of removal, kind of like you alluded to there. It does get around a lot of the pretty, like, you can't grasp of darknesses, which is kind of cool. But yeah, paying 4 and then just getting hit by murder, not the most fun.
Yeah.
Also, like a little weak against bounce spells, but anyway. Like a modestly powerful Pauper Cube, which, if you're trying to play a cube that kind of feels like retail limited, Pauper Cubes that are toned a little bit down to the sensible cards, no Sprout Swarms, then a card like this is pretty fun.
Yep. All right. Our next card is Dokuchi Silencer, which is 1 and a black for a 2/1 creature human ninja. That's an uncommon for those peasant cubes. It has ninjutsu for 1 and a black. Whenever Dokuchi Silencer deals combat damage to a player, you may discard a creature card. When you do, destroy target creature or planeswalker that player controls. I'm curious, before I get into why I like this, is this going in your Spooky Cube?
I had not planned on it. I think specifically discarding a creature card is unappealing to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this card is also they would not print it, at least at uncommon, if you could discard any card. So
Yeah,
I'm not asking for a better version of the card.
I think it'd be too good, but
yeah, I don't currently intend to put it in the Spooky Cube.
right. So this is so from my perspective, right, one of the reasons why I was excited to add this here is this card is the epitome of my combat cube. Like, it is everything that is like, it's not too good, but it lets you, it creates like a really tense board presence and interesting like little mini game related to combat. And you do have to discard real cards. But destroying a creature on hit is like a very powerful ability. So I think certain any peasant or higher level cube that is going for an explicit ninja theme, I do think this is a good thing to add. And it is nice that, generally speaking, one of the weaknesses of the ninja deck, right, is you spend picks and you play these like flying men variants that are like honestly not so good, right? You're mostly doing that to get your ninjas on the battlefield because they're usually very undercosted, right? If you like Ninja of the Deep Hours, right, is a 2-mana 2/2 haste Ophidian, right? That is what that card is if you're playing flying men to enable it. Now that card is like pretty stupid good. But obviously, like, it's not like Ninja of the Deep Hours is actually stupid good because you need to play the flying men. One of the things I love about the Silencer is you can discard the enabler that you pick up after it's done its job.
Yeah, that does rule. Yeah, that's one that I definitely expect to show up, certainly with ninja support. And again, this is one of those ninjas that has same casting cost and ninjutsu cost, and they're both cheap. So that's really nice. The next card we have is Go Shinte of Hidden Cruelty, the black member of our creature shrine cycle, 3 and a black for a 2/2 legendary enchantment creature. It is a shrine that is not a creature type, we will reiterate. Has Death Touch, and at the beginning of your end step, you may pay 1. When you do, destroy a target creature with toughness X or less, where X is the number of shrines you control. Honden of Night's Reach is kind of a disappointing card for me, because I love shrines and there is diminishing returns on repetitive discard. Like, if your opponent's just still hanging out with cards in hand, they probably couldn't play them anyway, But Go Shinte of Hidden Cruelty, you have that drawback. You have to spend the mana every turn. But this is repeatable Doomblades. This is a variant, a lower powered version of Visara the Dreadful. That's a good card. This is definitely going right into my Peasant Tubert, and I am very happy with this addition to the cycle.
Yeah, and it, unlike the other ones, like this actually, I'm pretty happy with the body too, right? Like, I guess the white one is like a 4-mana 1/3. I don't even know if it has an ability. Maybe it has Vigilance, which is just like not a body. That is just an enchantment that can be targeted by removal.
Yeah, the blue one's an 0/4.
Right. A 4-mana, like a 2/2 Death Touch, it can trade with an actual card. When you're playing, sometimes you play this card and you're like, you know what? My opponent doesn't have 1 toughness things. I don't have my other shrines yet. I'm just going to trade it with their 4-mana 4/4. And none of the other shrines do that. So I really like this shrine in limited, as that's been my experience with it. I've had multiple people concede to me having it because they have multiple targets that it just kills, and it's just like a 2/2 Death Touch that's going to trade up with a creature later in the game and murder 2 to 3 creatures.
Yeah, just brutal.
Yeah. All right, our next card is one I like quite a bit. It is Grave Lighter, which is 2 and a black for a 2/2 creature spirit. With flying, when Gravelighter enters the battlefield, draw a card if a creature died this turn. Otherwise, each player sacrifices a creature. And it's an uncommon. So this would be an absolute slam dunk into Pauper Cubes if you could play it there.
Yeah.
Where I think this finds a home is more limited set cubes. I think generally, and why I wanted to really mention it, I think that the 3-mana creature that's like an edict, right, tends to fall flat outside of Pauper Cubes. But they even tend to fall flat in limited. But you attach it to a flying body, it's way more meaningful. And 3-mana 2/2 flyer, when it enters the battlefield, draw a card is like a very good Magic card, and it's not that hard to set that up if that's what you want in a combat-oriented environment. So I would actually, I think this is a really great card if you're trying to create an environment that is like a fun limited set. It's not a broken uncommon. It's just a good uncommon, and that's that.
Yeah, upgraded version of a card we've seen many times before that could really use the upgrade.
Exactly.
And isn't pushed too far.
Right. Like, I think that the point is you're saying, like, it needs the upgrade. Like, I just haven't been happy with those types of cards in a while, but this one I'm finally happy with.
Yeah, Fleshbag Marauder, no good. Hasn't been good probably ever. You know, it showed up, which is a testament to the fact that an edict is good sometimes. This card gives you get something good sometimes when the edict is not good. So Flying Body, also a really nice touch. Like that card a lot. All right, next we have Hitsugu, Devouring Chaos, 3 and a black for a 4/4 legendary Ogre Demon. You can pay 1 black mana and sacrifice a creature to scry 2. You can pay 2 generic and 1 red mana and tap Hitsugu to exile a top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. When you exile a non-land card this way, Hitsugu Devouring Chaos deals damage equal to the exiled card's mana cost, or mana value, sorry, to any target. So we have like a kaboom kind of card, except if you hit a land, you can play it. And obviously you have your 4-drop here and you pay 3 and tap it to do it. So it's not like good that your big finish lets you play lands. Pretty steep cost for an Archivist. You just have a bunch of different minor things that combine to be decently powerful. This is just a really nice card for a cube of a modest power level.
Yeah, I see what you're going with there. I mean, for me, I guess it's so hard to get me to be excited about a sacrifice outlet that requires like mana. Like when you say a cube of a modest power level, can you talk to me about like what are the other kinds of cards that you expect to see around this? Because it's just I don't know if I've ever played a cube before where I feel like this card would have had a nice home there. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah. So it's definitely going to be the kind of cube environment that's going to be similar to the cubes we talk about with various skins and sizes, where the idea is they're kind of close to retail booster draft.
Mm-hmm.
Hitsugu really encapsulates kind of the feeling of a beatable rare.
Like sure.
The rate is really nice. Like this is a rare. You play against it and it's not like, oh, that's nothing. It's like, oh, that's pretty good. And I think for a lot of players, I mean, obviously you play a lot of limited, you are passionate about just traditional booster draft. But when it comes to cubes, I mean, we've played your classic cube. Like the power level is incredibly high.
Yeah, it's nothing like limited.
you have a taste for unbeatable rares, yes, as it were. So this is a much more tame cube. Probably people settling down to play a lot of turns. This is also the kind of card that's really at home in like a commander cube, mm-hmm, where you just need so many cards and like it generates value and it's cool. It's certainly not as good as most of the other cards in the set. But it's a fun card. It does cool things. You know, in a different year, let's call it 2003, this card possibly could have seen constructed play.
All right, that's fair. All right, so our next card is Junjie the Midnight Sky. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, so my bad.
Yeah, no, it's midnight.
It's 3 black for a 5/5 flying menace dragon spirit. When Junjie the Midnight Sky dies, choose 1. Each opponent discards 2 cards and loses 2 life, or put target non-dragon creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. You lose 2 life. So generally, most of just almost of the full cycle of these dragons, they're really cool cards, but they're not pushed enough to make it into that classic category. Like they're you know. You're not guaranteed to get value. They're, you know, most of the like 5 mana, really great, like 5 mana, 5/5 flying is a good rate, with a death trigger that's extremely powerful. You know, I love for a lot of them that there can be scenarios where like you don't care at all about the creature, you just want to sack it immediately. That was the case with the white one that we saw last week. And this is kind of the same. Like sometimes you'll have a way better non-dragon to reanimate. The way that I think about most of these is if you're in a like lower powered cube where you're moderating the amount of exile removal, these can be like really powerful, you know, exciting dragons. but it kind of sucks to play something like this, have it get exiled for 2 mana or whatever, and then move on.
Yeah, I'm assuming this card, even if I mention the card Birthing Pod, that doesn't move the needle for you.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, a little too steep. There's other stuff in 5. Certainly there's like 3 white creatures on 5 that do kind of the same thing. But I do like, I don't know why, because they're very similar in power level, but just controlling Junjie, like casting this card for 3 black, I like a lot more than AO on 3 white. I don't know why, but I do agree that this is definitely like a lower power level cubes kind of thing. It cannot hang with the highest power levels.
I think the reason that you like Junjie more than AO is the same reason you own a Grixis cube.
There might be something to that. I get to play other black cards with it.
Yeah.
All right, next up we have Leech Gauntlet, 1 and a black for a 2/2 artifact creature equipment leech. Has lifelink, and it gives equipped creature lifelink and reconfigure 4. That cost is steep. Moving this around as an actual equipment, not great. The reason I like this card is that for my artifact Tubert, I have a pretty big redesign on the horizon. I think I have ballpark of 20 cards from this set that I'm considering for inclusion. And the reason that Leech Gauntlet makes the list, well, combat's a big part of that cube. It's a lot of 1 mana 1/1 creatures, so a 2/2 lifelink that can matter in a big way in a number of games. But it's also the fact that black is one of the colors that is a little bit shallow on artifacts matters cards. There's more stuff going on in black than green, but there's only so many artifact creatures at this point that are palatable, despite Esper, Shards of Alara, pretty dated by today's standards. So just a black artifact creature with this stat line, it's not incredible, but it would make a lot of decks. And I imagine it's going to be true for a lot of artifact-based cubes. And then if you just talk about a peasant cube too, this is an uncommon 2 mana 2/2 lifelink. You can move the lifelink around. That can matter there too as well. I definitely drew the conclusion from working on my peasant Tubert that a way to make control work, life gain was like essential because of just the way the effects work and the way the games played out. You didn't gain some life. There were just like so many ways for games to just close on a whimper with some shot upstairs, like some red card or whatever it is, some creature with an ETB trigger. And being able to gain life actually allowed you to meaningfully play longer games.
Yeah, I mean, I can echo all of that. I'd say there are a lot of things that would have made me uncomfortable playing this kind of card in those types of cubes, like a much lower reconfigure cost or giving extra stats alongside the lifelink. Like for the same reason that it's important to have lifelink, it also can be extremely oppressive if it's very hard to interact with, like a lifelink based equipment. Now, most of the lifelink based equipment, they're like not great rates, and so like that's also okay. But if it can be a 2 mana 2/2 lifelink that you hit with a few times, once it's blanked, then you equip it and it does great things like that, that can also be a little oppressive in lower powered combat oriented environments. This one, I was really excited about it at the beginning of the set for limited. It's played a little bit lower than I expected, but also that's probably better in terms of the types of combat related artifact cubes we're talking about.
Definitely. Yeah, and like a reconfigure cost of 2, this card would be kind of bananas in those kinds of environments. Probably too much for retail limited. I guess, I haven't played too much when it comes to recent sets. Maybe we've moved that behind, but I'd be surprised if this card wasn't very good if the cost was 2. And it maybe would be appropriate to make it 3 for playing it safe, but this is a reasonable card to play it safe with.
All right, so our next card is Life of Toshiro Umezawa, which is 1 and a black for a saga. Its first chapter and second chapter is choose 1. Target creature gets +2/+2 until the end of the turn. Target creature gets -1/-1 until the end of the turn and gain 2 life. Then its third chapter, like the other sagas, it gets exiled and it comes back to the battlefield as a 2/3 human samurai enchantment creature with the ability that it can tap, pay 1 life, and add black to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast an instant or sorcery spell. So I'm actually just curious. I want you guess in limited, where do you think this card currently lands in terms of like, let's say you were, there's 300 cards in the set. Where do you place it in the current retail limited environment of, where it is among those 300 cards in terms of its performance?
So there's a decent clip of 1 toughness creatures in this or any set. So the ceiling, the 2/3 body's not that exciting. It's above rate for 2 mana, but whatever. The situation where you just kill 2 things, that's obviously spectacular. Pure aggressive, like the sorcery speed pump, is not great, but is good. Gaining 2 life, whatever. I mean, the ceiling case for this card is so high. The way that they print rares now, I'm sure that it's not better than most rares, but I would believe it's better than most uncommons.
So I'm just checking right now, but I believe it currently is coming in at the 5th highest win rate in the entire set, including
any
rares,
card,
including rares and mythics.
Jeez,
something like that. Where is it?
I guess does the format just really heavily incentivize having a bunch of 1 toughness creatures?
No. I mean, like there are strategies with a bunch of 1 toughness creatures, but like there's also ramp strategies with 6 drops and stuff like that are also doing well. This format actually has like a full kind of breadth. But the thing is like you can play a 1 drop. There are a lot of extra 1 drops too. So like if this isn't killing a creature, sometimes it's like the best Viashino Pyromancer you've ever seen. Right? Because you can go +2/+2 attack, +2/+2 attack. So it's like this 2 drop that facilitates like, the 2/3 isn't exciting, but remember you're spending 2 mana for a 2/3 with a relevant ability that either, kills a creature, gains you 4 life, or deals at least 4 damage. And that's like a modal thing. And it's like really hard to see how that, when I describe it that way, it's very easy to say like, that sounds like still a little too much. Like it's not really playing out that way. And just like the card, every time I see it, it's like mind-blowingly good. to like, I just couldn't have possibly thought it would be that good. And, it's still not being taken that highly, but it is currently, performing at some of the highest win rate in the set. There are only 3 uncommons that have win rates at the moment that are that high.
Without getting too deep into it and derailing the conversation, what kind of games is this tracking? Is this games where the card is literally cast, or how is that determined?
This is games in which the card was in your hand.
Okay, so you're just drawing it at all.
Yes.
It's the 5th best. Okay, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
That exceeds my expectations, and I thought I was aiming kind of high.
Right. So the reason why I wanted to say that, and I know this is about Cube, not retail limited, but when I say all of the sagas are performing way better than we think they are, like this is kind of what I mean. I think this card is fantastic. I think that most peasant cubes, just period, should be looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, with those stats, definitely worth a look. And, I have like a token theme going on in my peasant Tubert, and cutting a couple tokens down, or maybe getting aggressive with 1, as you pointed out, +2/+2 is totally fine. And the 2/3 body that gets into combat too. So a bunch of little things that come together, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like a mode. I mean, you could think of it as like, it's not only like efficient for its cost, but it's also like a modal spell. Those first 2 chapters really being able to choose of like, can you remove a thing? If not, like what's better, gaining life or dealing damage? I mean, that's almost, especially in a combat oriented environment, it's hard to ask for more of 2 mana.
Right. All right. So yeah, it sounds like a nice one to check out. Our next card is Malicious Malfunction. This is a sorcery for 1 black. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. If a creature would die this turn, exile instead. So this is between Infest and, was it Cry of the Carnarium? The 3rd Visit to Ravnica one that had the same text box, except it also checked creatures that already died or something. Like it was this with like 2 more sentences.
Oh, it was so weird. Yeah. Like it would exile anything that had died that turn.
Anyway, functionally incredibly similar, except reading this card doesn't make me mad.
That's fair. So that sounds like an upgrade.
quality of life upgrade there.
Yeah. All right. Our next card is Nashi, Moon Sage's Scion, which is 1 black for a legendary rat ninja. It has ninjutsu for 3 and a black, and it's a 3/2. Its ability, which, surprise, surprise, because it's a ninja, is going to be when it deals combat damage. Whenever Nashi, Moon Sage's Scion deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of each player's library. Until end of turn, you may play one of those cards. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost.
Greatness at any cost, baby.
Finally, it's back. You don't need to deal with, well, actually, I guess this is kind of like a May still, right?
That's true. It's kind of like you can take the coward's route and not cast any spells. Does this one make its way into the combat cube?
Yeah, this one does. I am a little, if I'm being 100% honest about it in the combat cube, I'm a little worried about the 4 mana part of it. But it seems to be, it's almost like exactly what the 3 and 4 mana creatures in the cube are really interesting, right? Because like you want them to be the exciting effects, because you just can't afford to put a 5 mana card in your deck. Mm-hmm. And so you want the 3 and 4 mana cards to have the exciting effects. It's a little worrisome to play like a 3 mana 3/2 that just like dies to one of the million cheap 1 mana removal spells in the format. Especially like it's a little scary to ninjutsu this in, especially into open mana. So I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up playing out unfortunately clunky, but I'm really excited for it. I mean, the fact of the matter is you hope by hitting a spell that you get to play off of it, it's more like you're ninjutsuing it in for 2, right?
Yeah, I just feel like the decisions that this card generates, assuming that the numbers make it playable, and they're low enough. Like 3 mana 3/2, not great, but it's castable. Ninjutsu 4, totally doable in a lot of games. There's going to be situations where it is clearly good to cast one of the spells, but you have to really consider the cost.
Yep.
Like, is a blocker worth 3 life? How much life is that going to gain you? How much damage do you stand to take outside of combat? Do they have a removal spell? Like, is this costing you 3 life versus 2 life if you didn't cast it? You know, it gets really grindy, like mathematically grindy in a way that I enjoy. That's maybe not for everybody, but I'm like a Lava Dart guy over here. I love that stuff.
No, I don't play Constructed much, but when I have a friend that used to have 2 decks, which was Burn and Death Shadow, and I loved playing that matchup.
Yes.
Like
that's like one of the best matches in all of coverage history, just like getting Burn versus Shadow in Modern, because just both players' approach to the matchup just matters a ton.
Yep. So I'm a big fan of this card. Again, I would have really appreciated a 3rd point of toughness here. But you can't have it all. I'm going to be really happy with this card, as you said, if the numbers line up, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't.
For sure. Next up is Nizumi Prowler, 1 and a black for a 3/1 artifact creature, rat ninja, ninjutsu for 1 and a black. So again, same cost to cast as 2 ninjutsu. And when Nizumi Prowler enters the battlefield, target creature you control gains Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. So this card is interesting to cast in situations even when you can ninjutsu it. Like if you just have some big thing to attack with Lifelink, that's pretty rad, especially if you're in one of those situations where it's like, I have a 3/3 and they have 2 2/2s. My attack's pretty bad, but maybe if my creature had Lifelink and Death Touch, it would be pretty good. So it opens up all these really interesting spots. It's also cool in like a token deck where it's like, I'm going to attack you with 2 1/1s. Okay, you blocked 1. Well, now your blocker's dead and I gain a life. You know, there's a lot of cool applications of this. I imagine this one is making the combat cube as well.
I'm not 100% sure on this one because there are a lot of really, really, really good black 2s.
Sure.
This one's going to depend, honestly, on I'm doing a rework in the combat cube for artifacts, and depending on how I see artifacts mattering in black will determine whether or not this makes it. I really want it to make it, particularly because like this is exactly the kind of card that I want. Like that 1-shot lifelink can really swing games in that environment. And so like it's certainly a card that I'm watching closely. I'm just not 100% sure if it's getting in there yet.
Fair enough. I like this card. I got to figure out where I'm going to play with it, but I'd be really surprised if I don't end up playing with it.
Yeah. Right. So our next card is another one of those sagas that you'll hear me rant about again. This is Okiba Reckoner Raid, which is single black mana. Like the other saga, its first 2 chapters are the same. Each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And then it transforms as its 3rd chapter into a Rat Rogue, which is a 2/2 with Menace. And the ability vehicles you control have Menace. So this card is fantastic. I think, and not even necessarily in an aggressive sense. So something that we've learned in Limited, at least in the last year, is that there's always like some black common that drains 2. It's like it's a creature and it usually drains 2 life. These commons have been historically extremely underrated. They always go late. Nobody ever really takes them high. And then later on in the format, people always start like asking, hey, I keep losing to this, or this keeps feeling a little bit better. And then people end up taking it later in the format. And now that we've had, sort of 17 lands data to look at it, the stats on these cards are just always sky high week 1 or whatever even. Like they're just very good. Like this card, its win rate in Limited, if it's in your opening hand. So if you can play this card on 1 in Limited, which is obviously the ceiling, but still like, the win rate of decks that are casting this on turn 1 is 65%.
Jeez.
Like that's unbelievable. Now, 17 lands, people who play there have an above average win rate to begin with, but like 55%. It's not like, they're winning 60% to begin with. So
65% is like player of the year.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So like its average performance, you could think about it, when you're playing it on turn 1 is 65%. And if you draw it in general, it's still in the 60s, So this card has been extremely impressive. Part of that has to do with the way that it plays beautifully with ninjutsu. Okay. Like it drains 2. You get the drain again, and the backside has Menace. So it's really hard for them to block. And it's only 1 mana to get that drain 2 again. Plus all of the enchantment synergies for the set. So obviously for the retail limited environment, this is inflated, but I don't even think you need to be like black aggro to have this in a pauper limited environment. Like probably the most powerful pauper environments with all of the Phyrexian Ragers and Denrova horror stuff, it's not going to work so well in, but that other type of pauper environment that we were talking about with a little bit more expensive removal, a little bit more like retail limited, I think generally you make your cube better by having cheaper cards. And this is a really nice cheap card to add.
In talking about some of the cheap creatures we've already talked about, the cards that made it in the classic section, conversation around sagas, and just kind of what I've seen play out, I think combination of not putting this in classic and realistically this not making my top 10 cube cards from this set, I think I blew it.
Okay.
Because I think that this is just a great black 1-drop.
Could be. It's possible that this is better than my worst black 1-drop in my classic cube. It is legitimately possible.
Yeah, it's going to be something to watch. And this was a point I made out about a red card. We're going to come up on that later. And it is more important for a red card, but being a threat that when you top deck it, a 1-mana creature, a 1-mana threat, it always gets that point. And if you got 2 turns, the Reckoner Raid gives you 2 points.
Yep.
Like it's a 1-drop that in the phase of the game where 1-drops have a high fail rate, has more creatures, more accessibility to removal spells. These things all kind of cascade in bad ways for 1-mana creatures. This card continues to do its job on the philosophy of fire.
Yes. Think of it like a 1-mana Viashino Pyromancer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I'm probably going to need some of these. I think that this is a card that I should be cubing with. So I don't know. I'm going to call it, but I'm going to say classic. As long as you're doing aggro, this card is probably worth a very serious look.
Yeah, agree.
All right, our next card is Reckoner Shakedown, 2 and a black for a sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose a non-land card from it. If you do, that player discards that card. If you don't, Put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature or vehicle you control. So it's a coercion, except it does something when discard is bad. And we've seen a little bit of this. Doomfall is the first card that comes to mind from Hour of Devastation, where you can either do the coercion or you can make them exile a creature. 2 mana sorcery speed edict, also not very good. Similarly, the other mode on this is kind of like in Aura, 2+1/+1 counters. But it's something that's good when a discard spell is not. This card is not incredible. However, it's 2 bad deals in a way where one of them is something that's like probably fine. And it's a common 2. So no matter what your restriction is, this card's a potential consideration, unless, it's an aesthetic thing like you're an old bordered cube or whatever, where you can play it in a pauper cube is the point I'm going for, and a range of power levels where you can get something out of this. It's not the most exciting. It's not going to be showing up in any of my cubes, but I like the design and I like cards like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as you sort of put it, it's not so flashy, but I can see it. And also one of the nice things that I do like about this is, like, let's say you have a creature that, like, it would be really bad for you. Like, you become very ahead on board simply by putting 2+1/+1 counters on a creature. That happens all the time. Yeah. But you never want to just blindly do it, because if your opponent kills your creature and you spent some mana to do that, you're in for trouble. The fact that you could, like, look at their hand and go, hey, I have this 2 mana 2/2 flyer. My opponent's at 12. They got a bunch of whatever creatures in their hand. Let's just clock them. They're dead in 3 turns. I think that's awesome. I don't know how many cubes this ends up finally making the cut for, but I'm glad that you brought it up.
All right, what we got next?
We got Soul Transfer, which is 1 black for a sorcery. Choose one. If you control an artifact and an enchantment as you cast this spell, you may choose both. I have a quick question. If it's as you cast it, does that mean it doesn't check on resolution? So, like, they can't in response remove an artifact or enchantment?
Correct, because you'll have to name the targets to actually put the spell on the stack as well.
Cool. And the 2 options are exile target creature or planeswalker, or return target creature or planeswalker from your graveyard to your hand. So this is a powerful card. We've seen quite a few, like 3 mana sorcery, destroy target creature or planeswalker with upside, like, what is it, Ruinous Wake or something like that? It, can be a creature if you spend 7 mana or something.
Yeah, the Awaken spell.
Yeah. Now, I think in most cubes, this one ends up being the worst of that bunch, because an artifact and enchantment is hard. But if you're a cube where you can support it, you might as well have this card, right?
Yeah, similar to Assassin's Ink, I think, in a lot of ways, except the power level on this one is a bit higher, albeit at sorcery speed.
Yeah.
And our next card is incredibly wordy. Tatsunari Toad Rider, 2 and a black for a 3/3 legendary human ninja. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, if you don't control a creature named Kaimi, create Kaimi, a legendary 3/3 black and green frog creature token. With whenever you cast an enchantment spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So your first enchantment gets you your 3/3 frog. If you already have the frog, you start draining life. And then another ability for 1 generic mana and 1 green-blue hybrid. Tatsunari Toad Rider and target frog you control can't be blocked this turn except by creatures with flying or reach. They don't get flying. You can't plummet them. So don't even think about it. This card is cool. Like, there's not that robust of an enchantment section in a lot of cubes. But if we're looking at the kind of cube where you're maybe interested in a card like Assassin's Ink or Soul Transfer, if you have an Enchantress theme, this is solid. Like, the green and white Enchantress effects still draw you a card. This one has a really serious damage output.
Yeah.
And it's not that expensive.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you just, like, play this and an enchantment, right? Like, in cubes with a ton of enchantments, you often have 1 mana enchantments. You just play this on 4, play an enchantment, and you have a 3/3 that, if you have your deck right, like, they can't kill because your next enchantment will just make another one. And then also this just clocks them, as you put it. I think if you have an Enchantress theme and you see that theme ever touch black, this is a great inclusion for your cube.
For sure. Same page.
All right. Our next card is Tribute to Hirobi, which is a 2-mana saga. Its first 2 chapters are each opponent creates a 1/1 black rogue token. And then its third chapter, which will happen after it's, giving the opponent 2 rogues, will transform into a Echo of Death's Wail, which is an enchantment creature spirit. It's a 3/3 flying haste, so this one actually can attack the first turn. When Echo of Death Wail enters the battlefield, gain control of all rat tokens. You actually get those rat tokens. And whenever Echo of Death's Wail attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, draw a card. This card is great. The way that things can get a little wonky if there's a lot of just extra ways to use those tokens, so you don't always get them. Usually you can think about this card as if you want to be exact, it's 2 mana, suspend 2, 3/3 flying that, draws you some cards, and you take 2 damage, maybe. Overall, it's not going to make your most powerful cube, but as I've said, these sagas have all been overperforming, and I think actually it probably has a really nice home in with cubes that will enjoy the previous Toad Rider, right? If you have an enchantment theme in a black cube, even at a higher clip power level, I think this card's a really great inclusion.
I will say that the greatest weakness of this card is probably enchantment removal. So
Sure, so they get to keep the 1/1s, and this never transforms, right?
Exactly. You're just kind of giving away 2 tokens, and a more enchantment heavy cube is likely, at least if I'm designing it, is going to have more disenchant.
Yes.
So it gets a little bit weaker there. And it's a little bit weaker if you have a sacrifice theme, because there's a chance your opponent just says, hey, thanks for the Goblin Bombardment fuel,
Yep.
But I want to try this card in my cubes that have Death Shadow. I want you to hit me with the rats, and then I'll get busy. So I like that interaction. And I'm curious, where does 17 lands put this one? Is Tribute to Hirobi cleaning house?
Let me see. I don't think it is.
Okay.
Tribute. It is. It's performing well enough, right? It's above the average by a few percentage points, but it's coming in at the same win rate as the best commons.
Okay, sure. It's not a bomb rare.
Maybe the literal best common. It's above. It's not a bomb rare, no, but it's a good rare, good uncommons, best commons. But we're talking it is the 50th or whatever in the set kind of thing.
Sure, that's still meaningful.
Yeah.
All right, our next card is Twisted Embrace. 2 black for an aura. Enchants an artifact or creature you control. When Twisted Embrace enters the battlefield, destroy a target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. As long as enchanted permanent is a creature, it gets +1/+1. Very meaningful that it enchants something that you control. You can't just be hanging out with no permanents and use this as a Doomblade. So this is a common. I imagine we're looking at this for a Pauper Cube. You have that pump coming along with your removal spell effect, and kind of similar to the conversation we've been having as a through line when it comes to a lot of these black commons and uncommons. It keeps the removal spell at an interesting rate where creatures are still appetizing. This one specifically says, hey, if you want to play me, you have to have your own creatures.
Yep. And, and there are some really common Pauper Cube cards too, whatever it is, Heliod's Pilgrim to search this up to. So it can also have some nice synergies.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Oh, there is another one. I thought that was the last one. And there's one more. Virus Beetle for 1 and a black for an artifact creature insect. It is a 1/1. When Virus Beetle enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. So literally, we've seen this card a bunch of times, and that card is played in certain cubes like Burglar Rats, right? Except this one is an artifact. So artifact cubes get to take advantage of it. And again, in this current limited format, we are seeing that artifact synergy take this over the top to actually be performing as one of the better black commons. So I'm excited this for any Pauper Cube that has any artifact theme. Without it, it's usually a downgrade, right, from a Burglar Rats because it can just like get eaten by things that benefit from like just destroying artifacts. But although maybe you're more interested in stuff like that as well, if you're like going with ninjas. I had a game today in Limited where I was returning this to my hand with a ninja to get my opponent's last card. So it's a cool card, Pauper Cube card, right?
Yep, and definitely. And also just the point I was making earlier about black as an artifact color. It's a cheap artifact creature. There's only so many of those.
Yep.
So worth paying attention to for that purpose as well. But like you said, that was our last black card for today's discussion. Any other points you want to make about black before we move on to red?
Nope, just play those sagas.
Yes, it seems to be a common theme that the sagas are powerful. Whether they're more powerful than they look, I guess it depends how they look to you, but they're good. All right, we're going to take another break, and it's going to be time to discuss the red cards for Cube from Kamigawa and Neon Dynasty.
Look, you're listening to the 540 podcast. I know you have cubes and new ideas and cards on the side you'd love to turn into something new and shiny. If you're looking to sell your Magic the Gathering cards, it's never been easier. Visit starcitygames.com/sell with a 30% store credit bonus and the fastest turnaround time in the industry. There's no reason to sell to anybody else. Enjoy 4 convenient ways to sell. Check out our buy list. Ship your cards to us. You can come to us, but also if you have over 500,000 cards you're looking to sell or own a store and want to sell off that bulk, we'll come to you. Go to starcitygames.com/sell now for more information.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's time to talk about red cards for Cube from Kamigawa and Neon Dynasty. Back to classic cards, in a sense. Our first card is Atsushi, the Blazing Sky. This is very similar to a card. We're kind of getting one of these in every set. And I guess I should introduce like a classic minus, because that's really more what this card is. But 2 red for a 4/4 legendary Dragon Spirit with flying and trample. When Atsushi, the Blazing Sky dies, choose 1. Exile the top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play those cards, or create 3 treasure tokens. So this is the red member of our Dragon Cycle. It is cheaper than the other ones, so it's a little bit better. It is not at all in contention with any of the very best red 4-mana creatures, or threats rather. Some planeswalkers in the conversation as well. Red 4-drops for a cube. But it's a card, it just gets your opponent dead. If you put this in your cube, those stats, big evasive creature for 4 mana and red, it's going to spend most of its time attacking, realistically. So I guess it's not at the highest power level, so not strictly classic, but also not really custom, because we all know what this card is doing.
Yeah, it's a weird type of situation where like there are just so like, because we get one every set, there's a very deep suite of like 4 mana 4/4 flying plus upside red creatures that are better than this. So it feels weird to put it in classic, but I can't say more than what you've just said.
Yeah, exactly. I like the abilities, but it's not a draw to a sacrifice theme. If you put it in a cube, if you're interested in playing a 4 mana 4/4 with flying and trample, you'll play this card.
All right, so our next card is Goro, Disciple of Ryusei, which is 1 in a red for a legendary creature, Goblin Samurai. Is a 2/2, and it has 2 abilities. 1, you can pay red. Creatures you control gain haste until the end of the turn. And 2, 3 red, create a 5/5 Dragon Spirit creature token with flying. Activate only if you control an attacking modified creature. So this card's interesting. I have put it in custom, so this is one of the places where we disagree. Part of that has to do with the fact that you can only activate that ability if you control a modified creature, and I feel like in it's not that often. Maybe there's some equipment running around that you're going to control a modified creature in Classic Cube, but I'm curious to hear your opinion on this.
Yeah, the 5 mana ability I'm kind of reading as flavor text.
Oh, I see.
It'll happen sometimes. You have a 2 mana 2/2, a legendary creature, so keep this one in your back pocket for the Mox Amber Cube. Yeah, exactly. Just 1 red mana, creatures you control gain haste. It's not always the most relevant thing in a red deck. It still comes up, though. As soon as you go into a 2-color aggressive deck, though, that ability really changes the texture of what combat can look like from turn to turn. And as a 2-mana 2/2, I'm never going to scoff at seeing this card in a pack. Like, you're just going to play Grizzly Bears in your red aggressive deck. And this one has some potential very high appeal. I don't really care one way or the other if it makes it into the Magic Online Vintage Cube. It won't meaningfully change the texture there. However, I'm not going to bat an eye if it makes it in. It's going to make some of my decks. It's certainly if I'm playing a red aggressive deck, I'm just going to play it sometimes.
I guess that's fair. 2-mana 2/2 with downside used to be the go-to.
Yeah. And then next up, back to Saga Town. We have Kumano faces Kakazan. Kakazan? I'm not sure. 1 red mana. Chapter 1 deals 1 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker they control. Chapter 2, when you cast your next creature spell this turn, that creature enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Chapter 3 is to exile it and return it as Etching of Kumano. 2/2 enchantment creature, human shaman with haste. And if a creature dealt damage this turn by a source you controlled would die, exile it instead. So that's the Yamabushi ability we saw in original Kamigawa. Little whatever, it's a 2/2 haste. That's a relevant thing here. And this is another one of those sagas. What I like about this card, you always get that first damage.
Yep.
Chapter 2 is a little dicey. Obviously, if you can't cast a creature, then you're not going to get that +1/+1 counter. But if you can cast a creature with haste, that's actually really good. And then the backside is above rate for a 1-drop they would ever print in red. So in my eyes, this card has to be playable.
Yeah, I think that there are many cards that end up in cubes for the purpose of being in mono red that are worse than this card for mono red.
Yes, I like that it triggers prowess too.
Ah, all right. So our next card is Lizard Blades, which is a great name for a card. Yes. Lizard Blades is 1. I was about to say black. It's not. It's 1 in a red for a 1/1 artifact creature equipment lizard. So it has reconfigure. It has double strike. Equipped creature has double strike, and its reconfigure cost is 2. So I love this card in lower powered cubes. But I guess, kind of same thing going on as the other red 2-drop we talked about. It deals damage. It does things. It does even have synergies. Stoneforge can get it. Like, put this in your classic cube, and my red aggressive decks will play this card.
I was going to name Goblin Rabble Master as a synergy. Just because that card trades with anything, but you really wish you could attack with it. Yeah. This is just a 2-drop. You'll play it. There's some good upsides too. Our next card is Ogre Head Helm, 1 in a red for a 2/2 artifact creature, Equipment Ogre. Equipped creature gets +2/+2, and whenever Ogre Head Helm or equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice it. It being the creature. So if this creature is it, you sacrifice it. If it's equipped creature, you sacrifice equipped creature. Then if you do that, you discard your hand and draw 3 cards. Reconfigure for 3. So totally passable as a 2-drop. That equipment is pretty strong.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's vulnerable because it's an equipment that itself, I guess reconfigure creatures are actually a little bit better against Doomblade than just equipment. The equipment itself dies. That's the problem. But in terms of getting blown out that turn by paying the equip cost, this creature is still there.
Yeah, and it can still attack because it didn't leave the battlefield or anything.
Yeah, some give and take there. And if you're in one of those spots where you can get a hit in, but you're not really sure how you're going to cross the finish line, then equipping this and drawing cards, refilling your hand, that's really powerful. And honestly, +2/+2 on an equipment, that makes it easy to at least force your opponent to chump block in a lot of spots.
Yep. Don't disagree. I'm super excited for this for my combat cube, but generally, I think it's just a good red 2 if you want to, if you can fit it, right?
Right.
So our next card is Rabbit Battery, which may be my favorite card in the entire red section for cubes. It's a 1-drop. Surprise, surprise. I like my 1-drops. It's cost a red for an artifact creature equipment rabbit. The type lines are so funny. It is a 1/1 haste, so a Raging Goblin. A quick creature gets +1/+1 and has haste and has reconfigure for a red. So this, and I think this actually gives Bomat Courier a run for its money for best Raging Goblin. Yes, Bomat Courier can do a ton of things with card advantage and everything, but the +1/+1 in haste actually gets this gets damage in that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get in, and your 1-drops doing that is incredibly powerful.
Absolutely.
That's not a thing that any other red 1-drops can do right now. And this one also can, just like you were talking about with the other red 2-drop that with haste, this gives red green a whole new texture. As an example, just you can play your Pelucranos with haste or whatever on turn 5, and that actually matters. Not to say that you should do that, but I'm a big fan of the red green stompy decks when they can come together, and they don't come together all that often. But yeah, I like this card a lot.
We talked a bit last week about Reconfigure as sort of like an anti-sweeper kind of plan.
Yeah. And
Rabbit Battery really executes in that role very well. Just keep it equipped at all times. And unless having it split up for attack on that turn, you don't have the mana laying around. But if you can reasonably do it, just keep it equipped. And then if your opponent plays Wrath of God, you have the battery back. You either at least have that or you haste up whatever you have left over. And
yep.
Yeah, this card is super cool, super good. Next up, we have Thundering Raiju. I kind of hemmed and hawed a little bit on this one. This is another classic minus, but anyway, 2 red for a 3/3 creature spirit with haste. Whenever Thundering Raiju attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then Thundering Raiju deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of modified creatures you control other than Thundering Raiju. So it can put the counter on itself, but then it checks your other modified creatures for the damage. 4 mana 4/4 with haste can keep growing every turn. You'll play that if you're looking for a 4-drop in an aggressive deck. That's just nice. The fact that you sometimes get the extra damage, that's really nice upside. The way that ability is templated, it does read like a custom card. I think the damage output is high enough where it's just that card just attacks really well. Specifically, I'm most excited to see if this is going to make it into Carmen Handy's Proliferate Cube. I really like the idea of attacking with this and just some creatures that naturally enter with +1/+1 counters. You can absolutely optimize for this card. At the end of the day, it's generally worse than Hellrider. If it's the only creature you control, it attacks as a 4/4. So I don't know. Slight give and take, generally worse than Hellrider.
I can't say any more about the card.
Yeah, that's everything.
And our last classic red card is going to be Twin Shot Sniper, which is 3 and a red for an artifact creature. It's a Goblin Archer. It's an archer, which means it has reach. It's a 2/3. When Twin Shot Sniper enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target, and it has the ability Channel for 1 and a red. Discard Twin Shot Sniper and deals 2 damage to any target. So we finally have the red Shriekmaw.
Yeah, Shriekmaw meets Fire Imp.
Yep.
It can go upstairs though. That matters.
Yep, it does. It matters quite a bit. There's a ton of just a bunch of different kinds of cards like this, but I think this is better than quite a lot of cards and quite a lot of cubes for those roles.
For sure. I'm especially a fan if your cube has Traverse the Ulvenwald.
Yep.
Discards as an artifact creature. It has good types, as we say.
Yeah, it's actually one of the things that I'm most excited about for how this will affect my classic cube is just the amount of just artifact creatures making even the Oni Blade that we were talking about. I'm super stoked. I actually have, not only do I have Traverse, but I have Grimflare in my classic cube, and so I'm really excited to play the Oni Blade alongside Grimflare.
For sure. Yeah, cards with 2 types, and just those are just 2 good aggressive 2-drops. Play really well together. Makes sense. Yep. All right, so that's it for the classic cards in red and the classic minus cards. Now it is time for the custom session. Our first custom card in red is Aki Ember Keeper, 1 in red for a 2/1 enchantment creature. Goblin Warrior, whenever a non-token modified creature you control dies, create a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token. This is a common. I mean, it's an enchantment creature, so it has 2 types, but the power level is really not there. I don't think we're talking about this for like your classic cube, for a lot of cubes that have Delirium. However, there's some nice upside on a decent aggressive creature for something like a Pauper cube.
Yeah, and I think particularly one with a general equipment theme, which now we should see more often thanks to Reconfigure. We've gotten, one of the problems with equipment is it's really hard to put enough equipment in your cube because you need enough creatures first. And that's, it can be hard to find a balance between removal spells, card advantage, or equipment, creatures, everything, right? So one of the things that I'd like to say in terms of how this is played out in Limited, and one of the reasons I may be more excited about it in Pauper cubes is like, I almost didn't, it's almost natural, but I almost didn't realize like how powerful it is to like jam a Bone Splitter on just creatures when you have this, not this creature. And then like, sure, the creature trades and now you have a 1/1 that's a 3/1 that you can bash in with. So it plays really nicely with equipment because then you can suit up the creature that it spits out.
Yeah, that sounds super nice.
All right, our next card is Ambitious Assault, which is 2 in a red for an instant. It says creatures you control get +2/+0 until the end of the turn. If you control a modified creature, draw a card. Another Pauper cube one, we see different go wide red decks get played in Pauper cubes quite a bit. And Trumpet Blast is a card that you'll literally see. This is an upgrade on Trumpet Blast and stuff like that.
Trumpet Blast with upside, that speaks to me. Next up is Crackling Emergence, 1 in a red for an aura. Enchant land you control. Enchanted land is a 3/3 red spirit creature with haste. It's still a land. And if enchanted land will be destroyed, instead sacrifice Crackling Emergence and that land gains indestructible until end of turn. There is a black card that's approximately this card. I should have looked it up because I had this thought when I added it to the list, but it's from Zendikar, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, is it like Corrupted Zendikon, I want to say is the card. Anyway, they did a lot more enchant lands that make them into creatures back then. But this is a common. It is a sizable body for 2 mana. It's technically 3 if you want to take advantage of the haste on that to attack for 3 that turn. But that's a really good return for damage in Pauper. You also have those new bridges, so you can just put it on a bridge and then it's indestructible. That's pretty nice. I don't think you're really going to see this anything above a Pauper cube, but the damage output is pretty appealing for a Pauper cube.
Yeah, I will say be a little careful. Like, yes, the indestructible combo is like really cool, but also you got to be a little afraid of stuff like Manowar and some of the enchantment based removal. Like, I think an arrest or a sleep style removal spell also kills the land. So you got to be pretty careful, particularly against the blue decks.
You don't have to be afraid or careful.
I guess the red mage probably isn't going to be afraid or careful either.
You'll just get punished sometimes.
All right. Our next card is Experimental Synthesizer, which is one of the cards that I'm really excited about. I think it's a slam dunk in Pauper, but honestly, if your cube has an artifact theme, it may just always make it in there. Experimental Synthesizer costs a single red mana. It's an artifact. When Experimental Synthesizer enters or leaves the battlefield, exile the top card of your library until the end of this turn. You may play that card, and it has the ability for 2 and a red. You may sacrifice Experimental Synthesizer and create a 2/2 white samurai creature token with vigilance. Activate only as a sorcery. So people in this limited format are calling this card Mull Drifter because it is a 2/2 that draws you 2 cards. And that's kind of how I expect it to play out in Pauper cubes. And I think it's honestly going to be a slam dunk in Pauper cubes. And I think it also, any cube with an artifact, like a real artifact theme, should look at this.
Yeah, I think it is important to have a lean mana curve. You want to make sure you can actually play that spell this turn. The more expensive it is, or if you're digging for a land and you miss it with this card, like there's a fail case. It's not fully on the level of Mull Drifter, but it is very appealing. For an artifact cube. I definitely importing this one into my artifact, Tubert, and part of that is also that ability to exile a top card to your library this turn is just if it leaves the battlefield. So you don't have to use that 3-mana ability to make that happen. You could sacrifice this to Arcbound Ravager, Quark Clan Ironworks, any other card that can sacrifice an artifact, which definitely increases the appeal for me. Right, our next card is Explosive Singularity. 8 red for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you may tap any number of untapped creatures you control. The spell costs 1 last to cast for each tapped creature this way, and Explosive Singularity deals 10 damage to any target. That's so much damage. It also is a lot of mana, even though it has kind of Convoke. I do like this quite a bit if you have kind of like a token theme, if you expect players to have tokens just kind of staring at each other. This just seems like a really fun spell to put on a stack.
Yeah, it also does seem like a fun spell to look at in your hand when you die, though.
No.
Okay, all right.
No.
All right.
How could you lose? It deals 10 damage.
10 damage is a lot of damage. You know what you should do? You should play this alongside the second right card.
Hitsugu second right? Yeah.
Yeah. You just play a bunch of tokens. Make sure never to attack with your tokens. Because if you deal a single damage to your opponent with your tokens, then your combo doesn't work. But
well, just play like a bunch of walls. Like an overgrown battlement, Axebane Guardian type beat.
I just actually imagine a kitchen table casual deck that's that. Do you imagine? Just a bunch of walls, 4 copies of Explosive Singularity, 4 copies of Second Right. That's the plan.
It's perfect. Yeah, don't even think about casting Fork on this. No, we need to get them with the right.
Okay, so I mean the card's cool for sure. It's more of like those big story moments about Cube that you can push for.
Yeah.
And it's, when you want to push for that, you can push for that. Maybe especially if you are trying to push a tokens theme in red. Right?
It's like a spirit bomb. It just rules.
All right, so our next card is one that I was so close to thinking about this in the classics section, but it's in custom. It's Fable of the Mirror Breaker, which is a saga for 2 and a red. Its first chapter is create a 2/2 red Goblin Shaman creature with whenever this creature attacks, create a treasure token. Its second chapter is you may discard up to 2 cards. If you do, draw that many cards. And then its third chapter is exile this saga, then return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. And the transform side is Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, which is an enchantment creature Goblin Shaman. It's a 2/2, has the ability 1, tap, create a token that's a copy of another target non-legendary creature you control, except it has haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So I have to tell you, reading this card was a really sad time because at every point I was getting more and more excited because my expectation was that the back of the card was going to be literally Kiki-Jiki.
Right.
I thought the back of the card would have haste, and I didn't think it would have that 1 mana activate ability so that it could actually combo with the twin pieces.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how mad you are that that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, one, I think like it just very. I mean, I was so excited to jam this into my cube. And as is, I think it's not going to be able to make it into my classic cube. Although honestly, it's possible it's something that I should look at anyways. As I've said, these sagas are massively overperforming everywhere. I think this one is I think this card's the card that's coming in as the best. Yeah, this card is if you win 70% of the time, it's in you draw it in limited. Now, there's only that's 2,000 samples. So rares tend to have low samples, but it's performing really highly there. And maybe I should be considering it for my classic cube. I mean, how much worse is this card than what's it called? The one that we got from MH1 that like discards cards and make 1/1s.
Season Pyromancer?
Season Pyromancer, right? Like you could think of this. I mean, like it's a 3 mana 2/2 that you can loot 2 to draw 2 and then makes another 2/2 with an ability. Like
that's an interesting comparison.
It's honestly like on rate. Maybe this should get bumped up to classic just because like on rate, it's pretty fantastic.
I might be sold actually, because like I think pretty highly of Seasoned Pyromancer. However, I don't play it in my decks with high mana curves because it's just like I don't want to necessarily discard my lands. And at least in an aggressive deck, you can discard your cheap creatures or like burn spells that aren't applying and get bodies. And like you're pretty happy about that. You're not necessarily happy to like discard your 5-drops to get a 1/1. But this card, you just play it on turn 3 every time. And then this is one of those sagas that turns into a creature. That's great, except this one's also a creature right away. And it's not just a creature right away. That creature you get right away makes treasure tokens. Like that's awesome. I was comparing it in my mind to Captain Lannery Storm.
Yeah.
However, like you lose on haste, but these other abilities like cleaning up your hand and getting to copy creatures, even if it's not free, like paying 1 mana is pretty cheap. This card is probably quite a bit better than Captain Lannery Storm, and I am pretty intrigued by the comparison to Seasoned Pyromancer as well.
Yeah, so I haven't had the opportunity to play it yet. I've played against it. I've killed it when I played against it, and then my opponent had a 2/2 that I blanked. But like that was like I spent a card to kill their card, but they were already like up 2 things from it because they had another card and they got to like discard some lands or whatever in limited.
Right.
I may test this in my classic cube the more I think about it.
Yeah, and then there's plenty of things you can queue off of discarding cards in cube. So there's just every part of it. You get 2 bodies, you have some mana ramp baked in there, you have some card filtering. Yeah, I guess I'm gonna give this one a second look for some of my cubes for sure. Right, next up we have Go Shinte of Ancient Wars. This one I think I understood the first time I read it. This is 2 in a red for a 2/2 legendary enchantment creature shrine with first strike. Beginning of your end step, you may pay 1. When you do, Go Shinte of Ancient Wars deals X damage to target player or planeswalker, where X is the number of shrines you control. So damage upstairs, 3 mana 2/2 for a strike body. That's solid, even in a peasant cube kind of environment. And being a shrine, if you're up to shrines, this is the second best red shrine. I will say it's worse than Honden of Infinite Rage. I forgot what the red sanctum is called, but that's like the worst one of any of them. And this is quite a bit better than that.
Yeah, if you're playing shrines, you'll check with this one. It's nice that it actually has a good body. But that's that.
Yep.
All right. Invoke Calamity, which is part of that Invoke cycle with a lot of pips. Costs 1 red, 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 red. I feel like I want to say like red a bunch more times. But 5 mana. It's an instant. You may cast up to 2 instant and or sorcery spells with total mana value 6 or less from your graveyard and or hand without paying their mana cost. If those spells would be put into your graveyard, exile them instead. Exile Invoke Calamity. So talk to me about this card. I don't think I had it on my list. And part of that has to do with like it. You're almost only getting value if you're doing this from the graveyard, right?
Yes, yeah. From your hand is not exciting. Like it's +1 mana. That will come up on a long enough timeline if you play with this out of whatever X hundred number of games. Sometimes the extra mana that'll come up. We skipped the black one because reading it was not at all exciting. I couldn't really even convince myself of that card for multiplayer games. Invoke Calamity, however, it has texture very similar to Finale of Red. What was that one called? Eternity?
That's I prefer Finale right. of Red. I think it's weird.
Yeah, Finale of everyone knows what Finale of Promise. I think it's Promise. Where you exile like an instant or sorcery and you have to like pay like the full casting cost or whatever the most expensive one is. This one's always 5, and in theory you can get 6 mana value worth of stuff, and it's up to 2 instant or sorceries and its total mana value 6, so you can cast a 6 mana card. So there's some comparisons here. I will say the casting cost is quite prohibitive. Red, 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 red. However, if you are really into getting some of the more niche storm stuff in, an example of a cube where you would do this, the Magic Online version of the Grixis cube was a 540 card cube supporting Storm. In order to do that, you have to get a little creative. You want to make sure you have a good volume of cards, and something that people used to do in Constructed Magic and Extended in their Mind's Desire decks was play Sins of the Past. So Invoke Calamity can just like get you another Mind's Desire, so it fits into those decks. Also very significant that red is easy off of Seething Song. And that doesn't necessarily have to go into a Storm deck. Like some weird versions of a red aggressive deck can facilitate those sorts of things. Like this gets you 2 burn spells back. And like I really like the occasional draft deck where I used to call it Goblin Dark Dwellers combo on stream. It's Seething Song, Goblin Dark Dwellers, cast Seething Song again, cast some other 5-drop. And like Invoke Calamity adds a layer. You Seething Song for Invoke Calamity, cast Seething Song plus a different spell. You know, you're really going off. It's like pretty niche, but the idea of casting the card actively excites me. And if I still maintained, even I think at 360 cards, this would be in the Grixis cube.
All right, sounds good.
It gets the wheels turning. It also casts Wheel of Fortune plus Ritual. So, you know. Anyway.
Okay. All right. You know, maybe if you have a Storm deck that is all of the rituals, all of the red rituals, I could buy it.
Yeah. Our next card is Ironhoof Boar. Not a Storm card at all. This is in fact going to be one of those Pauper Cube type cards. 5 in a red for a 5/4 artifact creature boar with trample and haste. Channel for 1 in a red. Discard Ironhoof Boar. Target creature gets +3/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. So this is not Gore Clan Rampager. However, that card's an uncommon and it's in 2 colors. This is a card that I imagine you would play in a lot of aggressively slanted Pauper Cube red decks.
Yep, that's exactly what it's here for. And, you know, artifact synergies are nice. You know, there are more of those now, and they can bleed into Pauper Cube a little bit more as well.
Yep.
All right, our next card is Kami's Flare, which is 1 in a red for an instant. Kami's Flare deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Kami's Flare also deals 2 damage to that permanent's controller if you control a modified creature. So 2 mana removal spell generally for Pauper Cubes, but one of the important things to talk about Kami's Flare is generally you can make an effort to not have burn go face depending on the environment that you want to create. I know some people who choose to not play, you know, the lightning strikes of the world because they want to sort of balance things around like, hey, like, I don't want there to be such a terrifying thing when you're at 3 to 6 life against a red deck. Now, Kami's Flare can deal damage if you control a modified creature, but it's nice that it can be one of those, you know, lightning strikes that doesn't go face that has the ability under certain synergies to push some extra damage.
Yeah, it pushes you to play more creatures, you know, specifically modified creatures in your red deck as opposed to just being like lava spikes, like a burn style deck. If you do that, it's really powerful. Yeah. But it does force you to play ball a little. So lots to like there. You know, personally, I'm excited about it as if we play a cube where we care about modifying creatures. I'm talking again about a style of cube that has a bunch of bestow creatures and like reconfigure and is trying to get you to do one or both. Then this is like kind of Searing Blaze, which is awesome.
Right.
Next up, we have Reinforced Ronin. This is a 1 red mana 2/2 artifact creature human samurai with haste. At the beginning of your end step, return a Reinforced Ronin to its owner's hand, and then channel 1 in a red. Discard Reinforced Ronin, draw a card. Paying 1 mana every turn to try to connect with a 2/2 haste is worse than a lot of 1-drops. You know, we talked about a 1 mana 2/2 haste with just like no other text being well above rate. Returning it to your hand every turn puts it kind of behind. You get your 2 points the first turn, but then you have to start recommitting mana and casting some other cards to keep that up, depending what your opponent's getting up to. The channel ability lets you cycle it, so that's fine. In a very high-powered cube, you don't really have mana to really mess around with this kind of stuff consistently. And the fact that it returns to your hand every turn, it's not necessarily the best artifact synergy. It's I imagine you probably are playing this card if you are a lower power cube and you want to like give exciting red cards that are not necessarily the most powerful. And then you also have like some neat stuff going on there. If there's sweepers, this card does play around sweepers. And if it is a lower power level cube, then the cycling ability starts to get some more appeal. I'm not convinced on this card for the most powerful cubes, but I can see why some people would be excited to play with it.
Yeah, and it does some things. Like you can end up having like a cycling theme in a cube. You can end up like there's a card. There's an artifact from this set. I've already seen this combo happen in limited. It's a 2-mana 2/1. Whenever you discard a card, you may exile that card, and you can play that card this turn. I've seen it looped with Reinforced Ronin for just 3-mana draw a card every turn, which is clunky. But when you flood it and you can do that, that's pretty powerful. Am I excited about this card? No. Do I think it is good? No. I don't. Do I think some cubes can enjoy it? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm specifically thinking of like impact tremors, and like that's
Sure.
a lot of setup for not a lot of payoff. However, I can see where it would fit somewhere.
Yeah. All right. Our next card is Scrap Welder. For 2 and a red, it is a Goblin Artificer creature with the activate ability tap. Sacrifice an artifact with mana value X. Return target artifact card with mana value less than X from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste until end of turn, and it is a 3/3. So the haste is pretty cool. It's a welder variant. It can't weld in big things. If you think of what's the card? Goblin Engineer that could only bring back things that are converted mana cost 3 or less. This one, it can bring back bigger things, but you have to sacrifice bigger things. I think generally speaking, it ends up being too clunky for the higher powered welder decks, just because, well, 1, you can never actually do the crazy stuff, and 2, it's 3 mana. But if you have a lower powered cube that has an artifact theme, this could be like a really nice way to chain through some artifacts.
It's an interesting card because it is an artifact synergy card. However, if your cube's really about artifacts, you really want cards that are artifacts.
Yeah.
Like you get some other stuff. Obviously you mentioned Goblin Welder, which is a much higher power level. I'm trying to think. I thought that crossed my mind, but immediately I shut it down. Like you can't really make a Goblin Welder that itself is an artifact.
No, you can't let it weld itself. That's not.
Like, that's just not really good design. Like you're just kind of giving away too much on that.
Yeah.
Maybe for Modern Horizons 3, that'll be a someday. So this one, I think at a larger cube size, when you really have gone past all of the cards that are artifacts, this starts to fit into your artifact cubes.
Yeah, and when you're trying to be like trinkety with it, right? Like you're value swapping between baubles type thing.
Right.
Then this gets a little bit more like I may cut Goblin Engineer from my classic cube as an example. One of the reasons why I've liked the Engineer is it can literally just like put an artifact in my graveyard, and I'm often happy about that. So like it gets itself started, and it's 2 mana, but like it plays more with trinkets. So the more that you're into doing that, the more Scrap Welder will be something to look at.
For sure. Next up is Seismic Wave, 2 and a red for an instant. Seismic Wave deals 2 damage to any target and 1 damage to each non-artifact creature target opponent controls. It's an uncommon. Good check on tokens.
Oh, yeah.
Reasonable chance this one makes it into my peasant Tubert. Just like I have a lot of token support. That stuff can get out of hand. You can fall way behind way quick.
Yeah, I was almost close to putting this in Classic, actually. Like, I know 3 mana is not really where you want to be for your interactive spells, but I think this card is significantly better than Arc Trail, than the like Arc Trail, Arc Lightning kind of cards that you still see in cubes.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like a slam dunk to keep tokens in check if that's what you want in lower rarity cubes as well.
Definitely. Yeah. Instant over Arc Trail. That's a big deal. Yep. You can't like 0.3 damage at your opponent or a planeswalker. However, we're talking about tokens, 1 toughness creatures. The ceiling otherwise is quite high.
Yep. So our next card is Simian Sling, another 1-drop. We do love our 1-drops on the 540 here. Mm-hmm. Simian Sling costs a single red mana. It's an artifact creature, Equipment Monkey, which is the best type line that has ever existed. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. Whenever Simian Sling or equipped creature becomes blocked, deals 1 damage to defending player. Reconfigure 2, and it's a 1/1. So, I mean, to me, this is just a really nice 1-drop for Pauper cubes.
Copper cubes, artifact
cubes. Yep.
Yeah, 1-mana 1/1. That's gonna. There's a lot of 1-mana 1/1s you play in your artifact cube. Arcbound Worker and every similar card, they tend to make it. The upside here is fine. I mean, like the big deal is that the reconfigure, cost 2. That's a little much, but it does at least pump. You get that +1/+1, so it's gonna show up. It's gonna matter. Okay, next up, we have Tawashi Song Shaper. 1 and a red for a 2/2 artifact creature, human artificer. Whenever another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, Tawashi Song Shaper gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Little weaker, but it is a 2-mana 2/2 artifact creature. Grows larger, and it's just entering the battlefield. So this checks artifact lands, checks tokens. It's going to be worth a slot in a lot of artifact cubes, and it is a common. I have to imagine that some people have a heavy artifact theme and like a pauper cube. Certainly Metalcraft is some appeal to that. So I used to do that for sure, 10 years ago, like making Carapace Forger a playable card. It was something that I thought was cool about my pauper cube, and wouldn't be surprised if some people are still keeping up those themes.
Yep.
Definitely reinforced by Modern Horizons 2 as well.
Oh, for sure. All right. And the next card, and this is going to be our last card for this podcast, is Voltage Surge, which is a single red mana. It's an instant. As an additional cost to cast the spell, you may sacrifice an artifact. Voltage Surge deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If this spell's additional cost was paid, it deals 4 damage instead. So I probably haven't told you this before. I lost my mind when I read this card the first time because I thought that said creature or player, not planeswalker. And I was about to jam this in every single cube I've ever made.
This card would be bonkers if it hit players.
But then I was disappointed and relegated to the custom section.
Are you at acceptance now? Or where are we in the stages of grief?
I'm just fine with it. Like, whatever. Yeah, I've accepted it. I was stoked for it in and I might still put it in my combat cube. I'm not exactly sure. One of the things in my combat cube specifically that I've been trying to figure out is 1 mana instant speed removal. I like having it basically not be able to kill 3 toughness things unless there's an extra condition you're paying.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just an interesting dynamic to think about during the draft, like knowing, okay, look, my opponent has 1 mana. Yes, they could kill my creature with Dismember. They could kill it with Snuff Out. They could kill it with Voltage Surge. They could kill it with, Fatal Push if some like after combat when a creature dies or whatever. But there's always going to be a condition that has to be met if you're jumping over, to a bigger size at 1 mana is an interesting thing I've toyed with. And I'm adding a bunch of artifacts and modular stuff, which, the sack can be pretty big upside. Regardless, if you have an artifact theme in any lower powered cube, I really like this shock variant.
That makes sense. I agree with everything you said about the card. The only point that I have to make is this is the most in-your-face example of every mechanic being kicker. Like, it's a joke that's tossed around a lot. And it's kind of true. Like, kicker was maybe a bad mechanic to literally do because it really kind of pulls the curtain back. And it's just like, it's all just asking you to do more stuff to get more stuff. But like this one is so literally just like generic text that could say kicker. Like, if this spell's additional cost was paid, if you paid the kicker cost, like it's just really laid out there. So I find that very funny.
Yep.
All right, so that's our last red card. Any other notes you want to make about red cards? Or, I'll give you the opportunity to talk about black or even white or blue cards if you want before we close the show here.
No. I mean, sagas. I can say it again. And I'll say it again, especially because, like, even now, like, I was already high on sagas and then rereading the Kiki Jiki card and going, you know what, maybe I should put that in my classic cube. Makes me want to, like, go back through the blue and the white cards even. And look at the sagas directly. Like maybe I missed something big there too.
Totally. It made me kind of happy that I have been procrastinating on updating my cubes. I mean, procrastinating is maybe a strong word because the set literally hasn't been released in paper yet. But, we had the card list and I've been putting it off. And that's a really good note there. Sagas, much better than they look. and maybe even better than that.
Yep.
So keep an eye on those ones for your cubes of any shape, size, and power level. So that's going to do it for red and black. Next week, we'll be back for green and the rest on our Kamigawa Neon Dynasty cube review here on the 540. I am Ryan Overturf. You can find me at Ryan Overdrive on Twitter. You can also find my articles weekly on StarCityGames.com. This week, Vintage Cube is coming back to Magic Online for a full 4-week stretch. My article will be about the updates as they come in. I believe some new Kamigawa cards will be added to the cube. So I'm pretty excited for that. Ryan, where can we find you? Ryan Saxe.
All right, y'all can find me at RC Saxe on Twitter, where I'm super active at the moment related to the current limited environment. If you couldn't tell from listening to the podcast, I'm having an absolute blast playing it. And you can find my articles on Limited at StarCityGames.com every Tuesday and Thursday.
All right, sounds good. And you can find both of us next week for our set review for Green and the Rest. We'll talk to you then.